I didn't expect a letter, certainly not one that would dismantle the single happiest memory of my life. It arrived on a Thursday morning, slipped under my apartment door like something deliberately meant to avoid confrontation. A crisp white envelope with my mother's handwriting, the same handwriting she used on birthday cards and lunchbox notes when I was a child. At first, I assumed it was a late wedding card, or maybe a small update from home. But the moment I opened it, the air shifted. Inside was a neatly typed invoice, 4 pages long, itemizing every detail of my wedding day, $36,000. Not a gift, not a misunderstanding, not even a conversation, just a bill. My breath caught somewhere between disbelief and something heavier, something closer to grief. This was a message, a declaration, an accusation, and it shattered something inside me that I didn't know was fragile. The wedding had been 3 months earlier, a quiet, elegant ceremony with soft white lanterns and a string quartet playing the same song my parents danced to at their own wedding. My mother had insisted on being heavily involved, saying, "Let us take care of you. Let us do this for you. It's what parents do." Those words echoed now in a different tone, cold and transactional. I stared at the invoice long enough for the letters to blur. As I read through each line, the world narrowed into a tunnel of confusion. I wasn't just being charged for the venue or catering. They had billed me for the dress, for the decor, for the photography, for the chairs, for the cake tasting, and even for the small vanity kit placed in the women's restroom. It was thorough, surgical, emotionless. That's when the memory began replaying in my mind. My parents standing beside me on the wedding day, smiling for pictures, telling me how proud they were, how beautiful everything looked, how honored they felt to help plan it. There was no hint of resentment. No suggestion that this was anything other than a gift of love. But gifts, my mother once told me, teach you who a person really is. Perhaps she was right, just not in the way she intended. The wedding had been perfect, almost dreamlike. And now, something heavy settled over the memory, darkening it like ink dropped into clear water. I could no longer separate what I had felt that day from what I was feeling now. My husband, Daniel, walked into the kitchen as I sat frozen. His eyes moved from my face to the papers spread across the table. He reached for them slowly, as if they might explode. "What is this?" he asked. I shook my head. "I don't know, but I did know. I just couldn't make myself believe it yet." He flipped through them, page after page. His brows tightened. "This is an invoice, a full invoice." Did they ever tell you they expected repayment?" "No," my voice broke. "They never said anything." The worst part was the tone of the document, formal, precise, professionally formatted. Not a single handwritten note or explanation, no emotion. It could have come from a vendor, but it didn't. It came from my parents. He placed the papers down with deliberate care and met my eyes. "You need to call them," he said softly. But I couldn't, not yet. The weight of $36,000 didn't scare me. What terrified me was what the invoice represented, an unraveling truth I had been avoiding for years. My parents didn't see this as a betrayal. They saw it as fairness. And fairness, in their world, had always been conditional. I leaned back and closed my eyes, letting the memory of my childhood seep in. The little things that once didn't feel important now glowed with new meaning. The subtle scores they kept, the tallies of who received what, the quiet comparisons between siblings, the whispered remarks about not letting anyone take advantage. I once thought these were quirks. Now I wondered if they were warnings. Warnings. The invoice had a due date, 30 days, as if that added legitimacy, as if love worked on deadlines. And at the bottom, in the smallest font on the page, it read, "Please remit payment promptly to avoid further action from my own parents." That's when something inside me finally cracked, not in anger, not in fear, but in recognition. This wasn't about money. This was about control. I grew up in a household where generosity always came with invisible strings. They weren't pulled immediately. No, that would have made the exchange too obvious. Instead, they were tucked away quietly, like threads waiting to be tugged when it benefited them most. My mother had a talent for keeping score without ever writing anything down. She remembered every holiday gift, every school expense, every favor. And while she never mentioned them outright at the time, she never forgot them either. My father was different. He rarely spoke about emotions, but his silence carried its own weight. He didn't believe in handouts, even to his own children. Nothing in life is free, he liked to say, not even love. Growing up, I thought this was normal, that every family operated on an unspoken ledger system. It wasn't until I moved out, worked my first job, and built a life with Daniel that I realized how unusual it all was. But despite the tension, despite the quiet transactions woven through my childhood, I convinced myself that my wedding would be different. Maybe I had thought this was their chance to show me something new, something unconditional. Just once. When my parents insisted on paying, I resisted at first. "We can manage it ourselves," I had said. "We don't want to burden you." My mother smiled, placing a hand against my cheek with a softness that made me forget every red flag I had once noticed. "Nonsense. Let us do this. This is our wedding gift. Our gift." A phrase that now felt sharpened, double-sided. In hindsight, I couldn't ignore the faint signs. The way my mother insisted on approving every vendor. The way she brushed off my preferences when they conflicted with her own. The way decisions were made while framing them as favors. "You'll thank me later. This is what a real wedding looks like. We're doing this for you." Those words had felt supportive then. Now they felt calculated. Daniel noticed the change in me as I sat silently at the kitchen table. "What are you thinking?" he asked. I struggled to articulate it. "I'm thinking, this isn't sudden. This is who they've always been. I just didn't want to see it." He pulled out a chair and sat beside me. Not across from me. Beside me. "Close. You're not alone in this," he said gently. "We'll figure it out, but you don't owe them money for your own wedding." But that was where things got complicated. Because on paper, the invoice was clear. The numbers were there, the due date was set, and my parents had always believed that anything they spent on me was a loan. Whether or not I agreed to the terms, it wasn't about affordability. Daniel and I had steady jobs. We could pay the amount if we absolutely had to. But paying it felt like surrendering something far more valuable than money. My independence, my boundaries, my dignity. I knew exactly what would happen if I sent them a check. The balance between us would shift further, deeper into their control. They would see it as validation, proof that their system worked. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. "They had the entire wedding to tell me this," I whispered. "At any point. They could have sat us down. They could have been honest." Daniel nodded. "They weren't honest because they didn't want honesty. They wanted leverage." The word hit hard. Leverage. That was exactly what this was. I thought back to the wedding night, the glowing candles, the speeches, the laughter. My father hugging Daniel and saying, "Welcome to the family." The same man who had now issued a bill as if I were a stranger renting their generosity. A soft ache spread through my chest. Not sharp, but persistent. A quiet mourning for a relationship I had been clinging to out of hope rather than truth. What hurt most wasn't the invoice. It was the realization that my parents had never understood the difference between supporting a child and investing in one. One is love. The other expects a return. And now, after 30 years of being their daughter, I finally understood which category I belonged to. I exhaled slowly. "I need to talk to them," Daniel nodded. "Whenever you're ready." I didn't feel ready. That silence would only feed their justification. And I already knew this was a conversation that would change everything. I drove to my parents' house with the invoice folded in my bag, though I didn't need it. I had memorized every number, every line, every passive-aggressive note. It wasn't written on paper anymore. It was carved into me. Daniel offered to come with me, but I shook my head. "This is something I have to face myself," I said, even though my hands trembled the entire drive. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt familiar in the worst way, tight, judgmental, heavy. My mother sat at the dining table, sipping tea as if nothing in the world was wrong. My father flipped through a newspaper, barely glancing up. For a moment, I almost backed out, almost apologized for disturbing them. Old habits, old conditioning. But not today. I placed the invoice on the table so gently that the paper barely made a sound. My mother's eyes flicked toward it and her smile tightened. Oh, good. You got it. I wasn't sure if email was still the best way to reach you. Reach me. As if she were contacting a distant cousin instead of her daughter. My father cleared his throat. We itemized everything fairly. That wedding was expensive, and your sister has her own needs. We can't keep spending all our money on you. There it was, the comparison. The wedge that had been hammered into our family long before this conversation. I forced myself to stay calm. Textness. You told me the wedding was your gift. My mother rolled her eyes. And it was. The experience was the gift. The costs are separate. I stared at her, stunned. That's not how gifts work, she shrugged. Well, that's how we do things. My father folded the newspaper and leaned forward. You're married now. It's time to handle your own responsibilities. We stepped in to help when you asked. My jaw tightened. I never asked. You insisted. Silence. Thick, telling silence. My mother sighed dramatically. Honestly, why are you making this difficult? You and Daniel both. Just pay it and move on. Just pay it. Like it was a parking ticket. Not a betrayal. I swallowed the sting in my chest. This isn't about the money. Oh, she snapped. Then what is it about? It's about the fact that you used my wedding as a way to trap me into a debt I never agreed to. My mother's face darkened instantly. How dare you accuse us of that? I held her gaze. Because that's exactly what you did. My father pushed back in his chair, expression cold. You're being ungrateful. Ungrateful. The word they loved the most. The weapon sharpened over decades. I took a slow breath. I spent my whole life trying to earn your approval. I thought this wedding was finally something you wanted to do out of love. My mother scoffed. We did it because weddings are a reflection of family. Do you think I wanted people thinking we couldn't afford a proper event? There it was, the truth hidden behind roses and chandeliers. It wasn't for me, I whispered. It was for your image. She didn't deny it, not even for a second. I straightened. I'm not paying the invoice. My father's jaw twitched. You will, he said, voice low, or don't expect us to help you with anything again. My heart ached, not because of the threat, but because it wasn't new. They had been dangling their help over me my entire life. Every meal, every ride, every holiday invitation had come with conditions. But this time, I finally saw the chains clearly. I don't want your help, I said quietly. Not anymore. My mother slammed her mug onto the table. So you're choosing to cause a scene? No, I said. I'm choosing myself. Her eyes filled with cold disbelief. After everything we've done for you. You didn't do it for me, I said. You did it so I wouldn't forget I owe you. My father's voice rose. You're acting like a child. And for once, I didn't shrink. No, I'm acting like someone who's done being manipulated. A long, tense silence filled the room. My mother crossed her arms. Fine. If this is how you want to be, then don't come around until you're ready to apologize. I nodded slowly. I won't. Their eyes widened at the finality in my voice. I turned and walked toward the door, each step feeling heavy but also strangely liberating, like removing weights I'd carried so long I forgot they weren't part of my body. At the doorway, I paused. I hope one day you understand why I'm doing this, I said without turning around. Because this isn't a daughter abandoning her parents. This is a daughter freeing herself. Then I left. For the first time in my life, I walked away without looking back. I sat in my car for 10 full minutes before I could even turn the engine on. The argument replayed in my head like a film reel. I never asked to watch. Their faces, their disappointment, the way my mother's voice cracked not with sadness but with irritation. The guilt tried to crawl back in. It always did. It was the first language I ever learned in that house. But this time I didn't let it settle. I exhaled slowly and pulled out my phone. Daniel had texted me twice. Nothing dramatic. Nothing overwhelming. Just, how did it go? I'm here. Whatever you need. That one line felt more like family than anything I had received inside that house for 28 years. When I got home, Daniel didn't ask questions. He didn't pry. He just pulled me into the kind of hug that makes you feel like you made the right choice, even if the world hasn't caught up yet. We sat on the couch, and I finally told him everything. The invoice, the confrontation, the ultimatum. He listened the whole time, really listened. No interruptions, no advice, just presence. When I finished, he exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. They really thought you'd just pay it, didn't they? Yes, I said. They always think I'll fold. Daniel leaned forward. So, what do you want to do now? I stared at my hands. I don't know. Part of me feels like I need to fix it, but another part of me. But I'm tired. I don't want to keep begging to be treated like a daughter. I looked up at him. I want peace, and I don't think I'll ever have that with them. Daniel nodded slowly. Then choose peace. His confidence in me was like oxygen. The next day I drafted an email, the kind that takes 30 minutes to write and 3 hours to emotionally revisit. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't petty. It wasn't vengeful. It was honest. I wrote, I love you both, but I can't continue a relationship that is based on debt, obligation, and conditional love. I'm not paying the invoice. I won't argue about it again. If you want a real relationship, one without manipulation, I'm open to that. If not, I wish you well, but I'm stepping back. I hovered over the send button, my heart in my throat. Then I clicked it. And just like that, the weight shifted, not gone, but moving. Hours passed with no reply. At 8:13 that evening, their response came. My father's name appeared on the screen like a storm warning. I opened the email. It was short. If you want to throw away your family over a misunderstanding, that's your choice. We will not chase after you. When you're ready to act like an adult, you know where to find us. Where to find us. I inhaled, expecting to feel shattered, but instead, I felt relief, because for the first time, their words didn't control me. For the first time, the guilt didn't win. I set the phone down and whispered to myself, I'm done. Days turned into weeks, weeks into a month, and something strange happened. My life got better. I slept easier. I smiled more. I cooked dinner without bracing for criticism. I laughed with Daniel without feeling undeserving. I woke up without the dread of disappointing someone before even brushing my teeth. One night, Daniel and I were lying in bed when he said quietly, You seem lighter. I feel lighter, I whispered. And it was true. Cutting off your parents, even toxic ones, isn't easy. It feels like ripping out the foundation of who you are. It feels wrong even when it's right, but sometimes the hardest boundaries are the ones that save you. I realized something important that night. They didn't cut me off because I did something wrong. They cut me off because I finally stopped letting them control me. And the moment I walked out of their house, without apologizing, without shrinking, I became someone they never expected, someone they couldn't manipulate. Someone they couldn't guilt into obedience, someone they couldn't own. A strange thing happens when the noise in your life stops. You start hearing yourself again. For weeks after the fallout, that silence felt foreign. I kept expecting my phone to ring, expecting another guilt-laced message, expecting another demand discussion. But the quiet stayed. At first, it felt like standing in an empty house after everyone's moved out, unfamiliar, too open, echoing with memories. Then slowly, it felt like peace. During that time, I started doing something I never had room for before, living. I took morning walks instead of rushing to fix someone else's emergency. I spent weekends with friends without checking my phone every 10 minutes. I let myself laugh, loudly, carelessly, without imagining my mother's disapproving stare in the background. Daniel noticed the changes before I did. One evening he walked into the living room where I was curled up on the sofa, reading, actually reading, not doom, scrolling or stress, planning. And he paused in the doorway. You look like yourself again, he said softly. I smiled, maybe for the first time. But the shift wasn't just emotional. It was internal, like rewiring years of programming. I'd spent most of my life in survival mode, operating in a home where love was currency, and I was always overdrawn. Learning to accept care, real care, was new, uncomfortable, and beautiful. Eventually, I started therapy, something my parents always dismissed as dramatic people with too much free time. But sitting in that safe space, talking out loud without fear of being shut down, helped me unravel the knots I'd been carrying since childhood. One thing my therapist said stuck with me. You weren't loved less. You were loved conditionally. And suddenly everything made sense. The favoritism, the blame, the comparisons, the invoice. My parents didn't love me the way parents should love. They loved me when I was useful. They loved my sister when she needed saving. They loved me when they needed saving. I spent years trying to earn a love that should have been mine by default. But not anymore. Another unexpected thing happened. I started reconnecting with people I had unintentionally distanced myself from. Turns out when your family drama controls your every thought and emotion, you don't have much bandwidth for relationships. My friends noticed the difference immediately. You glow now, my best friend Maya said, like you finally learned to breathe outside of their expectations. I guess I did, I said quietly. For the first time, the word family didn't feel like a cage. It felt like something you build, not something you inherit. One night out on the balcony, Daniel took my hand. You know, he said, a year ago you would have blamed yourself for all of this. I laughed softly. I kind of did. But not anymore, he said. Now you choose yourself. His words settled into my chest like a promise. I leaned my head on his shoulder. I used to feel guilty for that. And now I feel proud. And I did. Truly. Because choosing yourself after a lifetime of choosing everyone else is one of the bravest things a person can do. It's not selfish. It's self-respect. Looking back now, that invoice was never really about the money. It was a test. A final attempt to see if they could still control me, still make me dance to their tune, still keep me bound to a relationship that had been draining me dry for years. And when I refused to pay, when I finally said no, I wasn't just refusing a bill, I was reclaiming my life. Some people might think I'm heartless, that I abandoned my parents over money. But those people don't understand what it's like to grow up as someone's investment instead of their child. They don't know what it feels like to have every act of love come with a price tag attached years later. The truth is, I didn't abandon them. I freed myself. There's a difference. And if they ever want a real relationship, one built on mutual respect, boundaries, and unconditional love, my door is open. But I won't beg for scraps of affection anymore. I won't perform for approval. And I definitely won't pay for the privilege of being their daughter. Because I finally learned something my parents never taught me. Love isn't supposed to cost anything. Real love is free, and I deserve nothing less.